Man, if that last fight doesn't get you pumped up, this one has to. The reason I say that is because Yancy Medeiros loves to brawl. He trains with the Diaz brothers and Max Holloway. Think about that for a second. He loves to brawl. Now, looking on the flip side, when we talk about Hadžović, it's a fighter that, we haven't seen so much of, but in the fights that we have, it's kind of like, if he gets the opportunity to strike, he puts on a show. But, when you talk about the last two losses, I really enjoyed the wins that he put together against Polo Reyes, but in the two losses, that's what we're going to touch on the most, right? Because it's what he didn't do right. When you think about how easy it was for Christos Giagos to time his takedowns, we saw how good he was in his last fight. And, I talked about it in the previous video, but he's also really good at switching his stance and striking. He's not a terrible striker at all. And in fact, he had a great showing against Soriano. And in this fight, it's game plan to perfection, right? Why stand there with such a heavy-handed and heavy-footed kickboxer when you can just time the takedown so perfectly to get this fight to where you need it? Now, we can go right into the Renato Moicano fight at 155, and the same story, right? I think that Moicano found an opening to take it to the ground. And to be quite honest, it looked like Hadžović was getting frustrated already, even on the feet. I think Moicano just had something to prove and was very ready to make a statement on that night. And there was actually some bad blood towards the end of that fight. And I think it had something to do with the stand-up. And supposedly Hadžović was like, he wanted a rematch right away. And he wanted to be the next fight for him because he wanted to keep it standing. Like, what? You're an MMA homeboy. So I was a little taken aback by that little back and forth at the end of that fight. But my main thing that I want to take away from, just his overall performance is that if he's going to push forward like that, he needs to have kind of a bit more versatility in his approach, because I find if you take a look at a guy like Yancy Medeiros, who can kind of do a little bit of everything, right? I think we've seen it over the course of his fights. Now, the one thing we don't want to see is hands low, throwing crazy and getting tired. These are the areas where Yancy Medeiros need to work on things, right? When you talk about the Lando Venata fight, what's great about Lando Venata? He makes his fights interesting because he doesn't really lose any gas. If you keep Lando Venata in the fight for 3 rounds, he's going to give you the best version of him for 3 rounds. In his case, the Bobby Green, very similar fighter, and you played into his hands a little bit. On the flip side, Lando Venata dominated that 3rd round against Yancy Medeiros. And I think Yancy Medeiros was just fading and wasn't able to keep up with what Venata was kind of throwing at him. Now, in this fight, it's almost like you're not taking on that good of a speed and versatile striker, in my opinion. I think that Hadžović comes in with really big hooks, good kicks, but they're thrown with power. And I think that his approach is very much push forward, and try to land. So if I'm Yancy Medeiros, I got good body kicks. I can use some leg kicks, use my long jab. He likes to use his jab really long. And I think that if he can grind out a fight on the feet and just keep his distance, that's one way for him to win. And the other way, I really think he should have a grappling advantage here. When he's training with the guys that he is, originally he uses it mostly for defensive abilities to be able to keep the fight standing. But in this case, I can't see a reason why he wouldn't want to take this to the ground and exploit some of those weaknesses in Hadžović's game. Because if I'm Hadžović, there's one very clear path to victory, and maybe he's working on other things to do, in this fight specifically. But it's get into boxing range. It's avoid any kicks, avoid the takedowns, and just try to make this an absolute brawl. If he's able to land some of his own kicks, slow him down to the body, that's where Hadžović can have success. Medeiros is known to tire. So if you're hitting the body on a regular basis to a guy who's kind of tough to finish on the feet, via strikes, I think that's the best option for him. Because I don't think that he's going to be able to duel him on the ground and in the clinch work and stuff like that. Medeiros is an absolute gamer. He's got heart. And that's where these Hawaiian boys, it's tough to put them away, but you got to be technical about it, right? That's when you're going up against guys that can take damage and go 5 rounds, just absolutely giving it everything they've got. You got to be technical about it. Outsmart that aspect of their game, because he wants to brawl with you and he wants to be able to attack all 3 levels and dictate pace and get it to the ground if he needs to, all that kind of fun jazz. In Hadžović's case, I feel like the writing's on the wall when it comes to his game plan. I don't think that he's approaching this fight and thinking I'm going to watch a bunch of tape on Yancy Medeiros and see what I can do. Because the one thing for him also is maybe hang back a little bit, make him come to you, be more of a counter striker early round, make him force the energy. Because in the 2nd and 3rd rounds, if you get the Yancy Medeiros version that's a little bit slower after so much output, you might have a bit more success in avoiding the groundwork, maybe being able to beat the jabs and the kicks to get into boxing range and just start landing some big blows. Because that's the one thing about Hadžović is we got to give him a little bit of credit for his power and his striking ability. So with clearly such a It's funny. His reaction to the Moicano loss is what makes me realize he just doesn't like to grapple so much. You know, it's an obvious aspect of his game when he's calling out Moicano immediately after the fight to rematch. So that's where I'm kind of just seeing such a hole in his game. Obviously, it'd be better than the average UFC fighter, but I think that from a game plan perspective here, I'm not going to say better. Sorry, that's a terrible way of putting it, but I think it should be at par with the average UFC fighter, if not the below average UFC fighter. But in a fight like this against the Yancy Medeiroses of the world who have seen the Cerrones, the Gillespies, you know, that's where, for me, even in fighting land of Venata, right? In the Venata fight, it's very clear that the exertion, the tired aspect of it, Venata's energy to be able to increase and go with that output for 3 rounds. I mean, that's where he lost. That's where I think that he can actually make up for that fight in this one, where it's be more technical, keep those hands up, fight hard, and look to take it to the ground if you need to. And when you look at the lines, you've got minus 125 for Yancy and plus 105 for Damir. So they definitely think this fight's going to be standing. And like I said, there's areas in Yancy's game where he makes the mistakes, which is why you kind of got to give Damir some credit, because in those areas where he makes those mistakes, that's where Damir can win the fight. So I actually will be leaning Yancy for now, because I do think that from a technical perspective, from just overall waiting the fight for this long, I think he's got what it takes. And so that should be crazy exciting. If it doesn't end in the first round, expect that to be a war, a bloodbath, and 100% a potential fight of the night. So keep it locked.